Welcome back to Chapter by Chapter Classics, the short-form classic literature podcast where each episode walks you through a few chapters of a great book. Previously in Wuthering Heights, Catherine died after giving birth to young Cathy, Isabella escaped from Heathcliff, Hindley died, and Hareton was left under Heathcliff's control. In this episode, we're covering chapters 19 through 22, where Linton Heathcliff enters the story. Young Cathy begins to look beyond Thrushcross Grange, and Heathcliff's revenge turns towards the next generation.
Imagine a villain so, incredibly patient and calculated that instead of attacking his enemies directly with fists or weapons, he waits a decade to legally hijack their children's inheritance.
Yeah, it's a completely different kind of warfare.
It really is. Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're taking the stack of notes you've compiled for your upcoming chapter-by-chapter classics project, specifically focusing on chapters 19 through 22 of Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights.
Right, and our mission today is to extract the core mechanisms of how this story pivots. We're leaving the original explosive tragedy of Heathcliff and the older Catherine behind.
Exactly. The collateral damage is what we're looking at now, the kids who have been caught in the crossfire of this massive generational war.
Which requires an entirely different lens than the earlier parts of the novel. We're moving from a narrative driven by wild, untamed passion into something profoundly systemic.
Yeah, the violence hasn't disappeared, but it's mutated, right?
Mutated into bureaucratic manipulation and psychological warfare? Absolutely. Heathcliff is essentially setting up the board to steal Thrushcross Grange. And he's using the law, class prejudices, and the very structure of 19th century society to do it.
That structural shift is so glaring right at the start of chapter 19. We kick off with a major catalyst. Isabella Linton, who is Heathcliff's estranged wife who fled his abuse years ago, has died.
Right, so her brother, Edgar Linton, travels south to collect her orphan son, young Linton Heathcliff, and brings him back to Thrushcross Grange.
And meanwhile, Edgar's daughter, young Cathy, is waiting at the Grange. She's been intensely sheltered her whole life, and she is practically vibrating with anticipation at the thought of getting a real cousin to play with.
She's picturing this vibrant storybook companion. But Bronte is brilliant at setting up these romantic expectations only to aggressively shatter them.
Oh, totally shatter them.
When the carriage arrives, young Linton is the physical antithesis of a robust playmate. He's described as pale, delicate, and effeminate.
In the middle of relatively mild weather, he's wrapped in this heavy, fur-lined cloak. Nellie Dean even notices this sickly peevishness about him.
Yeah, he's crying, complaining, and just completely devoid of any youthful energy.
He's basically the embodiment of every negative Linton family trait dialed up to 11. He has their physical fragility and softness, but absolutely none of their compensating kindness or grace.
Right, but Edgar, to his credit, is completely willing to raise this boy with love to honor his late sister's memory.
But he barely gets a few hours to establish a connection. I mean, the ink isn't even dry on Linton's arrival before Joseph Heathcliff's fanatical servant shows up at the Grange.
Yeah, demanding the boy on Heathcliff's behalf that very night.
And here is where I have a serious bone to pick with Edgar Linton.
Uh-oh. Let's hear it.
Well, Edgar is a magistrate. He's a wealthy, powerful man in this community. He knows firsthand that Heathcliff is a monster who brutally abused Isabella. Why in the world doesn't Edgar just slam the door in Joseph's face and keep the child safe?
It's a fair point. Looking at it through a modern lens, Edgar's inaction feels a lot like cowardice. But diving into the historical realities of 19th century English law changes the picture entirely.
How so?
Well, we're dealing with the doctrine of absolute paternal rights. In this era, a child was fundamentally considered the property of the father. Mothers had virtually no custody rights, and uncles certainly had none.
Even if the father is a known abuser.
It does not matter to the courts if Heathcliff is known to be cruel or morally bankrupt. He is the biological father. All the law cares about.
So Edgar's wealth and his position as a magistrate are completely useless here.
Worse than useless, actually. Because Edgar is a magistrate, he is bound to uphold the very laws that Heathcliff is exploiting.
Wow. So he's trapped by his own position.
Exactly. If Edgar refuses to hand the boy over, Heathcliff simply goes to the courts, obtains a legal writ, and brings down the constabulary to take the boy by force.
And Edgar recognizes that a violent public legal battle would just traumatize both young Linton and young Cathy even more.
Right. Heathcliff's first weapon against the next generation isn't a fist, it's the English legal code.
That makes Edgar's surrender in chapter 20 so much more devastating. He's totally cornered by the system.
He really is. He orders Nellie Dean to sneak Linton out of the house at 5 in the morning, hoping to spare young Cathy the trauma of watching her cousin be dragged away.
And during that early morning ride over to Wuthering Heights, Nellie tries to prep the boy for where he's going. She mentions his father, and Linton's reaction is just, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, he genuinely says, "Mama never told me I had a father."
Isabella's trauma was so severe that she entirely erased Heathcliff from her son's reality.
Which is an understandable coping mechanism for Isabella, but it leaves Linton completely defenseless. He has no psychological armor for the wolf's den he's about to enter.
And Heathcliff makes zero effort to be welcoming.
None at all. The moment Linton arrives, Heathcliff inspects him like a disappointed farmer evaluating a sickly calf.
He literally calls him a puling chicken and a whey-faced, whining wretch.
Yes. He despises the boy instantly because Linton is a carbon copy of his hated rival, Edgar.
Yet he demands custody anyway, and he explicitly tells Nellie why. He says, "My son is prospective owner of your place, and I should not wish him to die till I was certain of being his successor."
It's so calculating.
Think about how a ruthless corporate raider operates today when acquiring a shell company. They don't care about the company's culture or its employees. They just want the specific legal instrument that company holds to execute a hostile takeover.
Oh, that corporate raider analogy perfectly captures the mechanics of Bronte's plot here.
Right. Heathcliff is acting exactly like that. He doesn't want a son. He wants the deed to Thrushcross Grange, and young Linton is merely the shell company holding it.
Precisely. Heathcliff is leveraging a legal mechanism called entailment. Thrushcross Grange is entailed property, meaning it can only pass down the male line.
So because Edgar Linton only has a daughter, Cathy, she can't inherit her own child at home.
Exactly. The property must pass to the closest male relative, who is Edgar's nephew, Linton. By controlling Linton, Heathcliff essentially controls the Grange. It is a stunningly cold, bureaucratic revenge.
Heathcliff's strategy for his new asset is fascinating, too. He tells Nellie he's going to hire a tutor for Linton.
He's going to isolate him, pamper him, and ensure he remains a polished gentleman.
But he's doing this specifically to maintain Linton's superiority over Hareton Earnshaw, the rightful heir of Wuthering Heights.
Right, whom Heathcliff has deliberately degraded into an uneducated farmhand. It's all about creating contrast.
Setting up those dominoes takes time, though, which propels the narrative forward into chapter 21.
We jump ahead several years. Cathy is turning 16, and we see the results of Edgar's parenting strategy.
Yeah, Edgar's response to the trauma of the past was to build this physical and psychological wall around his daughter.
She has never been past the park walls of the Grange by herself. She's desperate to go explore the natural rock formations, Penistone Crags, but Edgar keeps telling her, not yet.
Edgar is confusing innocence with ignorance. He thinks keeping her behind a wall protects her from Heathcliff. But by keeping her completely ignorant of the world and her own family history, he leaves her entirely vulnerable.
Absolutely. The second she finally sneaks out, she runs straight into Heathcliff on the moors.
He lures her back to Wuthering Heights, and she is reunited with Linton and meets Hareton. And the contrast between these three teenagers is jarring.
It's a brilliant character study. Linton has grown taller, but he's profoundly frail and endlessly demanding.
The housekeeper notes he sits wrapped in a cloak by the fire in the middle of summer, whining for sweets and throwing tantrums if anyone opens a window.
Yeah, and on the other hand, Hareton is deeply connected to the land. He's physically imposing and naturally intelligent, but he's been kept in brutal, dark ignorance.
He can't even read his own name carved above the door.
Which brings us to young Cathy's reaction.
This is where I struggle with her. She is supposed to be the good side of the family, but her behavior towards Hareton is awful.
It really is hard to read.
Hareton is genuinely trying to be hospitable, and she recoils from him. She mocks his thick Yorkshire accent. She assumes he's a servant. When she discovers he can't read, she bursts out laughing at him.
She shows this deeply ingrained elitism that makes her incredibly unlikable in this moment.
Yeah, isn't she supposed to be better than that?
Her behavior is certainly difficult to watch, but it serves a vital purpose in Bronte's exploration of class. Edgar's gentle, loving environment still produced a snob.
Because she measures a person's worth by their polish, their literacy, and their manners, rather than their innate character.
Exactly. And Heathcliff observes all of this. He watches Cathy mock the strong, capable Hareton and shower affection on the polished, toxic Linton. Heathcliff has basically weaponized education itself.
Wow, yeah. He gave education to the weak, fearful Linton, which only amplified his arrogance and entitlement.
And he deliberately withheld education from Hareton to reduce him to a brute, making Hareton ashamed of his own illiteracy.
So Heathcliff isn't just ruining their lives physically, he's fundamentally warping their minds.
Precisely. And he isn't hiding his endgame. He tells Nellie point blank that his master plan is for Linton and Cathy to fall in love and marry.
Because marriage is the final piece of his hostile takeover.
Under the laws of coverture at the time, a woman's property became her husband's upon marriage. If Cathy marries Linton, the vast wealth of Thrushcross Grange merges with Wuthering Heights under Linton's name, and by extension, under Heathcliff's absolute control.
It's so insidious. Nellie and Edgar naturally panic and put a stop to these visits immediately. Edgar finally gives Cathy a sanitized version of the history, explaining why Heathcliff is dangerous.
But they're dealing with isolated teenagers. If you tell an isolated teenager they cannot see the one new person they've met, they will find a way.
Oh, of course they will. Cathy and Linton begin smuggling love letters back and forth through a milk boy.
And when Nellie catches wind of this, she empties Cathy's drawer, burns all the letters in the fire, and threatens to tell Edgar if it happens again.
Nellie's intervention is dramatic, but fundamentally flawed, don't you think?
Oh, completely. She addresses the symptom, the letters, but ignores the underlying disease, which is Cathy's profound loneliness and lack of agency.
Right. Burning the letters stops the immediate communication, but it leaves Cathy emotionally raw, isolated, and feeling entirely misunderstood by the adults around her.
Which brings us to the psychological trap of Chapter 22. The physical environment shifts dramatically to mirror the narrative. Autumn arrives, bringing decay and cold.
And Edgar catches a severe cold that settles deep in his lungs, confining him indoors for the entire winter. The primary protector on the board is neutralized.
Cathy is grieving her father's failing health and mourning her severed connection with Linton. One afternoon, while walking along the Grange's outer wall, her hat blows over.
She climbs over the wall to retrieve it, and Nellie can't get the gate key to work, so Cathy is physically locked outside the wall. And who happens to be riding by?
Mr. Heathcliff.
Of course it is.
Yeah. This encounter is a masterclass in psychological warfare. Heathcliff has her physically cornered outside her safe haven. Years ago, the younger Heathcliff would have used physical intimidation or violence to get what he wanted.
But he doesn't lay a finger on her.
He doesn't need to.
He does something so much worse. Think about how emotional manipulators operate today as you're organizing your notes for this. They don't attack your weaknesses. They weaponize your strengths.
That's a great way to frame it. Heathcliff knows Cathy is deeply empathetic.
So he leans down from his horse and tells her that Linton is literally dying of a broken heart because she stopped writing. He paints this horrific picture of Linton pining away, swearing that the boy will be under the dirt before summer.
He tells her Linton is going to his grave and none but you can save him.
It is a staggering manipulation of guilt. By placing the responsibility for Linton's life squarely on her shoulders, he ensures she'll disobey her dying father.
He dares her to visit Wuthering Heights while he's away for a week, knowing her conscience won't let her stay away.
Heathcliff suffered horrific systemic abuse as a child at the hands of Hindley, but he isn't just repeating that cycle, he has refined it into an art form.
Yes, Hindley used his fists. Heathcliff uses psychology, tailored specifically to the vulnerabilities of the younger generation.
Pulling all of these threads together across these 4 chapters reveals something profound about Bronte's view of human nature. We're watching how environment and systemic deprivation entirely shape who a person becomes.
Exactly. Hareton wasn't born a brute. He was systematically starved of education and affection until he became one.
And Linton wasn't born a tyrant. He was raised in isolation, fear, and superficial indulgence.
And Cathy isn't naturally a prejudiced snob. She was walled off from reality until she mistook polish for goodness.
The tragedy of the second generation is that they are entirely products of the architecture Heathcliff built around them.
They're dancing to a tune they don't even realize is playing. The battlefield is no longer the open moors. It's the minds of these 3 teenagers, constrained by the legal and social boundaries of their world.
Which leaves us with a critical perspective to carry forward as you continue your work on the text. Bronte is showing us a villain who is executing his revenge without breaking a single law.
Heathcliff uses property entailment, paternal rights, marriage laws, and sanctioned educational disparities, the very pillars of polite society, to destroy polite society.
So before you jump into chapter 23 for your project, consider this. If a man can inflict this much devastation and orchestrate the total ruin of two families while playing exactly by society's rules, is Heathcliff the true monster of the novel, or is the system itself fundamentally monstrous?
It forces us to question whether the laws designed to maintain order are actually just tools waiting for a villain sophisticated enough to wield them.
Keep that question in mind as you turn the page. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the calculated, chilling evolution of Wuthering Heights. We'll be here whenever you're ready to unpack the next layer of your sources.
That's chapters 19 through 22. Linton claimed by Heathcliff, young Cathy drawn toward people and places she does not fully understand, and Hareton caught between his noble birth and his neglected upbringing. In the next episode, we'll cover chapters 23 through 27, where secret visits, emotional pressure, and Heathcliff's manipulation lead to one of the novel's cruelest turning points. Thanks for listening to Chapter by Chapter Classics. If this episode helped you follow a story, follow the show in your podcast app so you don't miss the next chapter. And if you're enjoying this series, please take a moment to rate the podcast or leave a short review. It really helps other readers and students find the show.